You know that image, right? That iconic image of Billie Jean King, fist in the air, after beating Bobby Riggs in that Battle of the Sexes match. That was about way more than just tennis.
Yeah, it really kind of captured that whole fight for women's equality, like way beyond just sports.
And that's exactly what we're going to get into today using this History Daily podcast episode. We're going to see what led up to that match, and how it went way past the tennis court. Like what's crazy to me is how this all kind of got going. A few years before, there was this like huge difference in prize money.
Oh, yeah. Back in 1970 at the Pacific Southwest Championships, the guy who won, he got $12,500, but the woman, only 1,500. It was like a total slap in the face, how unequal things were for women in tennis back then.
Seriously, that kind of gap is just wild to think about now. Like, what was going on back then that people thought that was okay?
Well, it was a different time, right? Lots of people just didn't see women's tennis as the same thing as men's tennis. Like they thought the matches weren't as exciting, wouldn't bring in the crowds or the hype.
So frustrating to hear, but thank goodness for Billie Jean King, right? And
Here.
Gladys Heldman. They said, nope, not happening. They basically risked their whole careers to start their own tournament, the Houston Women's Invitation. It's amazing they didn't just complain. They just went and did something about it, made their own space.
Absolutely. That's what makes their stories so awesome. They knew that nobody was going to just hand them change. They had
Yeah.
to make it happen. And that's what ended up leading to the whole Virginia Slims tour, which totally changed women's tennis.
Okay, we hear that all the time, revolutionized women's tennis. But what does that actually mean? What did the Virginia Slims Tour do that was so different?
It gave women more chances to play, earn a real living, and get recognized for their talent. Brought in new sponsors, got more media coverage, and helped build a fan base. It wasn't just about making a separate little corner for women's tennis. It was about making the whole sport better.
And this is where things get good. Enter Bobby Riggs. This former champ saw what was happening with women's tennis, all the attention it was getting, and figured, hey, there's something in this for me, but not in a nice way.
Riggs. Oh, he was a master at spinning stories and working the media. He just went full on male chauvinist pig mode,
Right.
challenged all these top women players, bragging how men were just better at tennis, super calculated, played right into all the tension and got people talking.
And it worked, right? He beat Margaret Court, who was incredible in that Mother's Day Massacre match. That must have been a huge blow to the whole movement.
Oh, it was. Definitely took the wind out of their sails, both symbolically and just morale-wise. But it showed how smart Riggs was. He knew exactly how to push those buttons, those prejudices and insecurities to get what he wanted. Reminds us progress isn't always a straight line. There's always going to be people trying to drag things back. And that's where Billie Jean King steps in, right? At first, she didn't really want to play Riggs, but then, after Court lost, she saw what it meant. It was bigger than just, some tennis match. It was like the whole future of women's sports was riding on it.
I bet that was a tough decision for King to accept that challenge. What do you think made her finally say yes?
Well, King was always ready to fight, especially when it came to something she really believed in. She knew this match could, reach the whole world and really change how people thought about women and equality. But she knew it was risky, too. If she lost, it would be a big setback for everything she'd been working for.
So you've got this crazy buildup, right? This ex-champ pulling these sexist stunts to get attention, and this rising star in women's tennis carrying the hopes of a whole movement. And it all comes down to the Houston Astrodome. Nothing like it had ever happened in tennis.
Man, the place was buzzing. Over 30,000 people packed in there and millions more watching on TV all around the world. It was like a cultural moment. These two whole ways of thinking about the world going head to head.
I can't even imagine the pressure King must have felt. It wasn't just about winning. It was about proving something, breaking down stereotypes, inspiring people.
And don't forget the media, right? They were going crazy with the whole battle of the sexes angle, making everything so simple, like it was just about men versus women. Shows how the media can really shape how people see things, for good or bad.
There was this one thing in the podcast that really got me. They said King double faulted on her very first serve. Can you imagine that? The whole world watching, all those hopes on her, and she messes up right off the bat.
Totally shows how strong she was mentally. To be able to just shake that off and end up dominating the match. She won in straight sets, proved she wasn't just a great player, but a total force.
It's such a powerful image. King not just winning, but crushing it. Shutting down all the doubters and haters.
Yeah.
It meant so much more than just what happened on the court.
Oh, for sure. It became this symbol of women's power, showed what you can do if you don't give up. And it really challenged how people thought about men and women. But it did a lot for the sport of tennis, too.
It feels like that match was a turning point for women's tennis, don't you think?
Totally. It made a lot of people who used to write it off finally take women's tennis seriously. Brought in new fans, sponsors, and got the media paying attention. Made way for more opportunities for women athletes.
And King didn't stop there. She kept fighting for equality,
Yeah.
using her fame to speak up for women everywhere, not just in sports.
She really wanted to make real change. It's inspiring. Like in 1974, she started the Women's Sports Foundation, which helps girls and women through sports.
She did so much, from fighting for equal prize money to starting an organization that's helped so many women athletes. Her impact is huge.
It shows that one person can really change things. Even when the odds are stacked against you, you can win with courage and by never giving up. But we got to remember, the fight for equality is not over.
It's been like 50 years since that match, right? And you got to wonder, have things really changed that much? Do women athletes get the same respect, the same money, the same chances as men?
That's a tough one. I mean, things are definitely better, but there's still a ways to go. We still see those gaps in pay, in how much media coverage they get, and even sponsorship deals.
Kind of sad, right? Like, we're still fighting some of the same battles King was fighting back then.
Yeah, it just shows how hard it is to change things. Those deep down biases and the unfair systems don't disappear overnight. We got to keep pushing, speaking up, and not letting things slide.
So what can we do? How do we keep making things better, make sure all athletes get a fair shot, no matter if they're men or women?
I think the first step is just noticing it. Being aware of all the ways that bias shows up, not just in sports, but everywhere. Support those groups that are fighting for equality, like the Women's Sports Foundation. And most importantly, make sure we're listening to women athletes and sharing their stories.
Yeah, that's huge. We got to celebrate their wins, talk about what they're doing, and push the media to give them equal coverage.
Exactly. It's not enough to just say there's a problem, we got to do something about it.
Yeah.
It's not just about making things equal. It's about creating a world where all athletes feel valued and can be their best.
Thinking back on this whole battle of the sexes thing, it's crazy how powerful that story still is. Shows how sports can change the world, how one event can spark a whole movement, and how being brave can inspire so many people.
It's an amazing legacy, and it keeps that conversation about equality going. Makes us think about how to build a fairer world for everyone.
Thanks for hanging out with us on this deep dive, going back in time with us. We hope this gave you a fresh look at the battle of the sexes and all that it means. But remember, the fight for equality doesn't stop here. Keep talking about it, keep supporting it, and let's build that future together.